Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Devine, and this presentation is on the moral decision-making process, and we're going to focus on utilitarianism in this presentation. The dilemma I'd like to bring up is Guantanamo Bay, and the question arises, is inhumane treatment of terror suspects morally acceptable or not? And is it morally acceptable for the rights of an individual to be violated for the greater good? For those of you who don't know, there's an interrogation method at Guantanamo Bay called Enhanced Interrogation. This uses torturous things such as waterboarding, sleep deprivation, starvation, isolation to extract intelligence from their prisoners. The utilitarianist approach to any given situation is to take the utilities and combine them with the disutilities. Whichever decision produces the most amount of utilities is the correct and morally acceptable decision to go with. There is a difference, however, between act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Act utilitarianism will go solely based on the utilities and disutilities. Rule utilitarianism, however, will give more weight and special consideration to certain utilities, such as human life. While approaching this issue at Guantanamo Bay, we have to ask ourselves, what utility does this have? The first one I can think of is national security. Intelligence extracted from prisoners at Guantanamo Bay can be forwarded to local law enforcement agencies, federal agencies, as well as military personnel to provide intelligence and insight in the apprehension of terror suspects, also the prevention of terror acts, which could lead to the preservation of life. Not only can we save lives here in America, we can also save lives worldwide because this intelligence is very valuable as it can be forwarded to other governments around the world so that they too can protect their borders and citizens from terror acts. Then we have to ask ourselves, what disutility does this have? The first one I can think of is lack of human rights. Torture as methods is not included in basic human rights, and it strips the individual of those rights. This is also unjust. One can ask themselves, does somebody who merely conspired against the United States government, however, did not pull off any acts, do they really deserve to be tortured? We can also think of people who are in prison who are innocent. There could be people who were victims of discrimination who have been imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay. So what produces the most utility using enhanced interrogation? Well, of course, more American lives are saved. We do have stronger intelligence, but we don't have any concrete intelligence that proves that any information gained from enhanced interrogation has indeed helped. However, we do have this quote that may give some insight as to why we don't have specific examples. The quote says, "Experts gain valuable intelligence practically every day from the detainees here. Some of it, of course, is simply small pieces of the puzzle that we're able to answer. And some has actually been critical, timely information to support ongoing operations. Specific examples of how intelligence gained here has helped in the war on terror are classified, but I can tell you that we've gained intelligence that on occasions have led to support of real-time, ongoing operations in the global war on terrorism." This quote states that while we don't have specific examples, it exists, and we don't have those examples because the information is classified. A few other facts that we have to consider in the argument for enhanced interrogation is that 19% of released prisoners have re-engaged in terrorist activity, and another 14.3% of released prisoners have been suspected of re-engaging in terrorist activity. So this brings into question the disutility of those who are innocent being imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay. If we're releasing people from this prison and they're going back into terror activities, how many innocent people could there be in there? Some other facts for using enhanced interrogation that we do have to understand is that in 2007, there were 14,415 terror attacks worldwide, and in 2012, there were 12,000 people killed. So this intelligence gained from Guantanamo Bay could have prevented some of these deaths and lowered these numbers significantly, as it provides assistance to military personnel as well as law enforcement agencies worldwide. Talking about all the utilities, we have to now take into consideration the disutilities. The dehumanization of these torturous methods is definitely one disutility. To dehumanize somebody, you strip them of their human identity. If you were to look at some of these prisoners, they would appear as zombie-like, lifeless, listless, definitely not normal human beings. This also leaves room for discrimination. Post 9/11, Americans were scared and looking for somebody to point the finger at. Unfortunately, this fell to the stereotypical terrorist, somebody of Middle Eastern descent that practices the Muslim religion. It was so easy to discriminate against a culture that we don't understand and accuse somebody of terrorist activity when, again, we don't understand their culture. And we could have them wrongly imprisoned just because we think they're a terrorist. While in prison, they undergo torture. And torture is definitely a big disutility. So they use methods such as waterboarding, sleep deprivation, starvation, isolation for enhanced interrogation. And this also leads to bad intelligence. If somebody's torturing you and depriving you of sleep, depriving you of food, waterboarding you, you're going to tell them whatever they want to know, and you're going to make up lies, things that they want to hear just so they stop. So this method has been proved to be ineffective by people such as John McCain, who one would think would be in support of this. So in conclusion, we have to take the utilities, put them up against the disutilities, and see if the good outweighs the bad. So at its peak, Guantanamo Bay held 779 prisoners. And again, this is at its peak. Currently it holds about 152 prisoners, but for all intents and purposes, we're going to say 779 prisoners, and we're going to assume that they're all being tortured simultaneously. So this is an important fact because we're going to take the number of prisoners being tortured and put that up against the 14,415 attacks and 12,000 deaths globally. The 779 seems pretty small and insignificant. But then we also have to remember, dehumanization versus human life. Is it okay to dehumanize somebody just to save another's life? Well, dehumanization isn't exactly killing the person. So if we're going to strip somebody of their human identity, but they'll still be alive, is it worth saving somebody else? And we also have to consider that this method has been proved to be ineffective. What I found is quite interesting. Under ACT utilitarianism, this method seems to be morally acceptable. The sheer numbers alone tell the story. 779 prisoners as opposed to 12,000 deaths and 14,415 attacks. It definitely seems like enhanced interrogation produces the utility that we need to lower these numbers. Under rule utilitarianism, this method seems to be morally unacceptable. Are we going to dehumanize somebody to possibly save a few lives? To dehumanize somebody is to strip them of their human identity, which one could argue is indeed killing the individual. So are we going to dehumanize somebody to possibly save a human life for an ineffective method? There's far better ways of extracting information from prisoners. So that's why under rule utilitarianism, I found this to be morally unacceptable. This concludes this presentation, and I thank everybody for watching and listening. The sources I've used to gather my statistics listed, also the quote listed in one of the slides, are posted in the next slide.